as balance dictates.
Hello ladies and gents, Nerf Aurelia here, and today I have for you my updated Akali guide for Season 8. Some of you guys have been requesting this for a while, and I finally got around to making it, so I hope you find this helpful. I've been playing Akali since Season 3, and she's easily my favorite champ, so I hope my insight can help you learn how to play her to her max potential. There will be timestamps in the description if you'd like to skip to certain parts of the video if you want to learn something specific about her. So without further ado, let's get into the guide. Alright, so to start off, why should you play Akali in the first place? A lot of people think that she's a very linear champ, and to be fair, she kind of is, but to give credit where credit is due, she actually has a lot more depth to her than most people think. She has a ton of outplay potential with her Shroud and ultimate and can make big plays if you are good with her. Akali one-tricks are one of the scariest types of mains in all of League of Legends, and if you're good with her, then she is a great champion to climb with. I've gotten to plat with her the past couple of seasons, and it isn't too hard to achieve this because of my experience with her. I don't really have time during the school year to play League, so I usually stop playing ranked around low plat to focus on school. But with time and dedication, you can easily get to Diamond with her. She's one of the easiest champions to get Diamond with by far. She's also really fun, and I'm glad that I chose her as my main. And also just a quick note, you should always play Akali with one of these skins or you are disgraced to the Akali Master Race. Alright, so the first thing we should discuss is Akali's passive Twin Disciplines. Akali's first auto attack against an enemy will heal her, and the second auto attack within a certain time frame will deal bonus damage to the enemy. The cooldown of her passive starts out at 8 seconds and goes down to 4 seconds at level 9. For early game during the laning phase, you should primarily be using the first part of the passive to heal off of minions to avoid having to back so you can keep farming. You should be using the second part of her passive to either harass your lane opponent or to help you farm under turret. You can harass your lane opponent by auto-attacking a minion to get the heal, and then going in on them to proc the second part of her passive to help you win the trade. Later on in the game, you usually won't have time to proc her first passive before going in, so after laning phase is over, that is less important, and you shouldn't waste time trying to do it as it may lead to easy kills escaping. Mark of the Assassin is Akali's Q, and it's her bread and butter ability. So Akali throws out her comma at a target unit and marks them for 6 seconds. The initial damage it does to enemies is pretty low, but the mark can be procced by auto-attacking the unit to consume it and do a ton of bonus damage to them. You should always max this ability first because it is vital to doing well as Akali. There were times in the past where maxing E first was a good idea in some circumstances, but today those circumstances are very rare, and maxing Q is the better option 99% of the time. One important thing to note about Mark of the Assassin is that it lasts for 6 seconds at level 1 and has a 6-second cooldown. This means that you can mark a unit with your Q and wait a little bit before going in on your enemy to proc the Q. This allows for what is known as the double moto proc, which I will explain later on in the combo section. Mark of the Assassin is good for zoning your lane opponent and can be used for farming under turrets as well. Also, proccing the mark will return 40 energy, so you should always aim to proc it to get that energy return. Twilight Shroud is Akali's main defensive tool that also has a lot of cool offensive uses to it as well. Akali blinks to a target location and leaves behind a shroud that grants her stealth and bonus movement speed while she is inside of the shroud. The shroud also grants sight of the area it was placed in and slows enemies inside the shroud. Note that the shroud grants Akali invisibility and not camouflage, which means that she will not be revealed by pink wards and nearby enemies. The only things that can reveal Akali in her shroud is abilities that grant true sight, like Thresh's Hook. One small trick that I've learned about Twilight Shroud is that once you press the button to use Twilight Shroud, it can't be stopped. This means that you can bait out important CC from the enemy team. For example, in this clip you can see that Malphite uses his ult on me, but despite being knocked up, I'm still able to use Twilight Shroud, which prevents the enemy team from following up on Malphite's engage. In this clip you can see that I get the Shroud out, but I don't get the blink. Most people who play against Akali don't know this. They will most likely assume that you're able to blink somewhere in the Shroud, and they'll aim their skill shots accordingly despite you staying in the same spot. This trick works on all forms of CC. Using this trick can make or break fights and is useful for burning through enemy CC, so practicing your timing with this will be very important. And after you master it, you'll find yourself doing much better in certain matchups and during late game team fights. Akali's E is called Crescent Slash and is probably her least important and most boring ability. So Akali slashes her commas around her doing AoE damage to nearby targets, and that's basically it. This ability burns through energy pretty quickly, so try not to spam it too much. You should generally use this ability in early game trades and to help finish off low health enemies during fights. This ability is also good for farming under turret during the laning phase and pushing turrets when you are split pushing. An important note to make is that the cooldown is reduced by 60% if you kill a unit with it, so try to use it in situations where you know you'll kill something so it can come back more quickly. Akali's ultimate is called Shadow Dance and is one of the most important parts for Kit and is what really makes Akali who she is. Akali dashes to a target unit and deals magic damage to them upon reaching them. It is important to note that Akali will dash slightly behind the target, which is decreased if they are marked by Mark of the Assassin. Akali can hold up to 3 charges of Shadow Dance and periodically gains a charge, and also gains charges through takedowns on enemy champions, so kills and assists. The pass-through that Akali gets when she uses her ult against champions is actually really useful for dodging skill shots. So for example, if you dash to, say, Ahri, she may not expect how far you'll land behind her and will miss her charm as a result, which will allow you to kill her or at least win the trade. Akali's dash can't be interrupted by CC, or at least most of it, so even if you get snared by Morg's Q, for example, mid-dash, you'll always get to the target before the CC takes effect on you, which can allow you to proc your Q or use your E or something for a potential kill and get a reset. Akali's ult also has some pretty cool interactions with some of the abilities in this game. A good example of this would be Lee Sin's ultimate. In this clip you can see that if Lee Sin tries to ult me as I'm dashing to him with my ult, he'll kick me backwards instead of forwards because of the pass-through. This means that if you're pushed up in lane and he tries to gank you from behind, then you can just dash to him and then laugh at him as he kicks you back to your turret. I think if he does like a frame perfect kick or something insane like that, he may be able to kick you in the correct direction, but it'll probably never happen in a regular game. I'm sure her ult has other cool interactions with other abilities in this game, but Lee Sin's ult was the first one that came to mind when I was making this guide. I use 2 rune pages for Akali, but I generally stick with the one you see on your screen right now. It really all comes down to preference, but this is the one that I like to use. You should always go into the domination tree as your main tree, however. Dark Harvest actually isn't all that bad on Akali, and taking it doesn't put you at too much of a disadvantage, but Electrocute is more reliable, which is why I take it over Dark Harvest. Maybe in the future, if Dark Harvest gets buffed and Electrocute gets nerfed, it'll be worth taking over it, but for now Electrocute is the way to go. The other runes in Domination Tree are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go into detail about why you should take them. The secondary tree is where it usually differs. Using this page, you should use these 2 runes because they're useful for surviving close all-ins and team fights and help you finish off low health enemies with your combos, which is vital late game. Here's the second page that I see a lot of Akali mains going. If you use this page, then you want to take Absolute Focus as your first rune for the extra damage and all-ins, and Scorch for the extra poke in the early game and damage to finish off enemies during the late game. I prefer the first page, but either page is honestly fine and is up to preference. Akali actually has quite a few different options for starting items. The standard start that I go with in most of my games is Dark Seal and a refillable potion. This gives you some nice AP to start out with and better sustain with your potion, and also increases your snowball potential if you're able to get an early kill on your opponent. The second most common start that I do is Doran's Shield and a potion. This is good against lanes that you know will be poking you a lot because it gives you some good defense against the poke. Getting a refillable potion after your first back isn't a bad idea either. The next option you have is Cloth Armor and Potions, but you're generally better off going Doran's Shield in this case. Sometimes you want to have those extra potions with Cloth Armor, which is fine, but going Doran's Shield is usually the better option. The last option you have is Boots and Potions. This is a good start if you need some extra potions and are up against lanes that have skill shots or CC that you absolutely need to dodge. The extra movement speed can be very useful for dodging them and can help you win early trades with the extra movement speed. I almost never start this, but the option is always there if you think you might need it. For summoner spells, there isn't too much to say here. I always go Flash and Ignite. There's really no other reason to go anything else besides these 2. If you're playing Akali top, you might want to go Flash and Teleport, but even then I see most Akali players taking Flash and Ignite up top lane. Maybe once you get to higher elo like High Diamond or Masters, you want to take Teleport because they can punish you for not having it. But otherwise, Ignite is great for finishing off enemies in early all-ins, which can be the difference between a massive snowball and falling behind. I can't remember the last time I actually took anything other than Flash and Ignite, so that is what I recommend going. The order in which you should max your abilities should look like this. You max Q first, then E second, and finish it off with W. And obviously take your ultimate whenever you can. I like to put a second point in Q at level 3 because a level 2 Q does a lot of damage for a level 3 trade. You can put a point in E at level 3, but I prefer 2 points in Q, so it's all up to preference. One thing you should never do, however, is to get E at level 2. Shroud at level 2 is very important because level 2 is where players start making big trades with each other, and you will take a lot of damage if you don't have your Shroud to avoid it. Take E at level 3 at the earliest, otherwise you should take Q at level 3. For item builds, you generally want to build 6 of these items. One rule that you should always follow is that you always need to get Gunblade first. If you're in a normal game and you're screwing around and stuff, and you're having fun with weird builds, then you can go whatever you want, but otherwise you should always be getting Gunblade first, no exceptions. After Gunblade, you can get Sork Boots, Ninja Tabby, or Merc Treads. I almost always go Sork Boots because that is what I'm most comfortable with, but if the enemy team has a lot of AD or if they have a lot of CC that you might have trouble against, then either of the options isn't a bad choice. After I get Gunblade and Boots, I usually go into Zhonya's Hourglass next. I feel that this is the best decision because at this point in the game you are most likely going to start getting into skirmishes and fights, and Zhonya's can really come in clutch in these situations. Getting Deathcap or Lichbane gives you a lot of damage, sure, but if you get CC'd or caught out, then you're going to have a difficult time surviving. Zhonya's is generally a safer choice and is what I go with 99% of the time. After I get Zhonya's, I will either go into Deathcap or Lichbane depending on how the game is going. If you're out and about killing a ton of people and you back with a lot of gold, then getting Deathcap is the way to go, otherwise go for Lichbane. Sometimes I like to go for Leandri's Torment because the magic pen is really good against squishies, but this is really rare for me to do, and about 99% of the time I don't do it. After I get Deathcap or Lichbane, I'll then get whichever item I didn't get previously. Now you have a lot of options to go with for your last item. If you're feeling confident and want a lot more damage and movement speed, then Luden's Echo is a good choice to go with. If the enemy team is starting to stack a lot of magic resist, then Void Staff is the best choice to go with. Against teams with a lot of CC, getting Scimitar, Sterix, Gage, or Banshees is the way to go. If the enemy team has fed burst mages like Syndra or Annie, then getting a Maw to avoid being one-shot isn't a bad idea either. None of the stats from Guardian Angel are wasted on Akali, so that is always a good buy if you think you'll need it. If you want to go a more defensive route, then any of the defensive items you see on this list are all good options depending on what you're going up against. Akali has quite a few combos that she can do throughout the game. In this section, I'll go over a ton of combos that you can do to help you win the game. So to start off, the most basic combo that you'll be doing throughout most of the laning phase is your Q plus Shroud combo. Basically, you want to mark your opponent with Q, and then as soon as it lands, you want to Shroud right in their face to proc the Q, and then run back into your Shroud. If you have your E up, then you can throw that in there as well after you proc your Q for some extra damage. This can be hard to do against ranged champions because the blink from Shroud doesn't have very much range, but it's really easy to do against melee opponents. Another option you have is to mark them with Q and then wait a little bit for your Q cooldown to get close to coming back up, and then Shroud blinking to them to proc it, and then throwing another Q at them to get another proc off. This combo is only really good for the early laning phase because once you hit level 6 and you get your ult, you don't need to use your Shroud blink to get to them anymore. The next combo is for after you hit level 6 and is called the double Moda proc. This combo is most effective during the laning phase because your opponent won't have as many options to run away to other than to their turret. For this combo, you want to mark your opponent with your Q and then wait for a little bit to have your Q come off cooldown. As soon as your Q comes off cooldown, you want to ult your opponent, auto attack them to proc the Q, throw out another Q at them, and then auto attack them again for 2 Q procs in a single combo, which is why it's called the double Moda proc. You can also throw out your E at the very end of the combo for more damage. Something important that I should mention is that after you mark them with Q first, you should then auto attack a minion to get the heal from your passive, so when you go in on your opponent, you will have the second part of your passive ready for even more damage. So the end of the combo should look something like this. Once it gets past laning phase, you won't have as much time to wait for your Q to come off cooldown. So in this case, you're going to want to do the single Moda proc instead of the double Moda proc. The combo for this is simply using your Q on an opponent and then dashing to them with your ult, and then finally proccing the Q with an auto attack, and then using your E at the very end. If you feel that you're in danger after you use your E, then you can immediately Shroud to stay protected. It is important to note that you should always wait a little bit after you throw your Q out, because it has quite a slow travel time, and if you ult to your target immediately after throwing it out, it'll screw up the combo and you'll end up auto-attacking before the Q gets there, and you won't get the proc off. It might take a little practice, but you'll eventually get to the point where you will be able to time it perfectly. The last combo to go over is called the dash combo, and is used when your opponent is too far away from you to use your Q on them before you dash to them. In this case, you want to ult to them first and then use your Q on them. After you Q them, you want to auto attack them for the proc and then throw your E in there at the very end for bonus damage. Afterwards, you can use your Shroud if you feel you're in danger. What you do during the early game really depends on who you're laning against. If your lane opponent is melee, it's usually a lot easier than against ranged champions, as ranged champions have an easier time zoning you out of lane and poking you. Against melee champions, you want to keep them marked with your Q as much as possible. Akali does a good job at zoning out melee champions with their Q early on, and if you see them try to go for minion, then it's a perfect opportunity to use your Q plus Shroud combo to do a ton of damage to them. You can keep doing this constantly and win trades and get a CS advantage over your opponent. This makes getting Gunblade a lot easier and you will hit your power spike much more quickly. If you're doing well and your opponent is kinda bad, then you can even end up in situations like this. Against ranged champions, sometimes Akali can struggle. Unless you can cheese them early on, you usually won't be able to do too much against them until you're level 6. Pre-6, you want to use your Q mainly for farming, but if you see an opportunity, you can do the Q plus Shroud combo and quickly retreat into your Shroud and back to safety. If you see a good opportunity to all-in them, then go for it, and retreat to your Shroud if it goes badly. If they're low enough and their exhaust or defensive summoner spells are on cooldown, then a flash Q proc can net you an easy kill. This also works against melee champions. Once you hit level 6, laning becomes a lot easier. After you hit level 6, you should probably have at least a revolver, which will make things even easier for you. As long as you didn't feed and stayed at least close to even against your lane opponent, then you should have no problem winning trades and all-inning them. At this point in the game, you want to start doing the double moto procs I talked about earlier against your lane opponent, which should make it really easy to win trades and kill them if they aren't at full health. Remember to auto-attack a minion before you go in on them, as going in with the second part of your passive up instead of the first is vital for maximum damage output. If you see that your top or bot is pushed up, then you can go ahead and leave your lane to gank for your team and hopefully pick up some kills or at least get a flash or two out of the enemy team. This can increase your snowball potential, so if you see the opportunity, then go for it. Another cool thing worth mentioning is that after level 6, if you're getting ganked and you can't Shroud blink back to your turret, then you can stall in your Shroud for as long as you can and wait for the enemy minions to kill all of your minions and get to your tower. Once they are there, you can just ult to the minions and get back to your tower alive. So that's a great way for escaping ganks, if you're able to do that. Also, just as a quick side note, you should always strive to get a pink ward on your first or second back, because the vision control you can get with them is crazy. You should always get at least 4 or 5 pink wards by the end of the game because they are vital to the success of your team. This spot in particular is absolutely amazing for pink wards during the early game. You want to put it right at the edge of the bush to get maximum vision. Nobody ever goes through that bush, and even if they do, they probably won't see it, so it's the perfect place to get vision on the enemy jungler. I've had games where those pink wards have lasted in that spot for over 15 minutes. If the enemy jungler gets Duskblade, however, don't waste your time putting those there because Duskblade will be triggered by it and they'll just destroy it right away. There isn't too much to go over for mid-game. There are really only 2 things that you'll be doing during mid-game. You should either be split pushing or farming champions. Just as a quick tip, a good way to catch out enemy champions if they're still in lane is to dash to the minion wave to get in range, and then go for a single moto proc combo or a dash combo if they try to get away with flash or a mobility spell. Because Akali's passive works on turrets, she's really good at split pushing, so if you see that top or bot is wide open, then go ahead and start pushing it. After you get Gunblade, Akali is really good at killing squishy AD carries, so bot lane is especially good to be around for catching people out or split pushing. Akali is extremely good at skirmishes, so getting into 2v3s or 3v3s can really help you get snowballing and can allow you to carry the game. Late game is where you can really see the difference between a good Akali player and a great Akali player. Teamfights can be difficult for Akali, but if you're able to utilize her ult and Shroud very well, then you can easily pop off and get clean aces. If I see that my team is all prepared to engage on the enemy team, there are moments where I am actually the one to engage for my team. If the enemy team doesn't have any CC that can push you out of your Shroud, like a Blitz or Thresh Hook for example, then something really great that you can do is go right in and then immediately Shroud. Typically what happens is that the enemy team will see you go in by yourself and burn a lot of summoners and abilities trying to kill you, but all of that will be meaningless because you'll be safe in your shroud. This makes it incredibly easy for your team to initiate and can win whole team fights for you. If you get pushed out of your shroud or something bad happens, then you can always use Zhonya's as a failsafe. Otherwise, letting your team engage first or flanking around the back can make it really easy to get to the enemy carries and take them out before they have a significant impact on the fight. Another thing to note is that at this point in the game, Akali becomes a monster split pusher. Her passive paired with Lichbane makes her one of the best characters in the game for taking down turrets and inhibitors. Something that I try to do is to get my team to distract all of the members on the enemy team away from their base. And if they can do that, then you can easily take multiple towers and even an inhibitor if they distract them long enough. Even if the enemy team is able to send a person back to try and stop you, if they aren't fed enough to kill you, then you can easily insta-kill them and continue on split pushing. If the enemy team decides to engage on your team, then that gives you a great opportunity to keep going, and you'll easily have taken multiple turrets and even an inhibitor during the fight. If the enemy team doesn't have any inhibitor turrets left, you can also easily just go through the jungle and take the inhibitor right from under their noses, which can win the game. Alright guys, so that was my Akali guide, and I hope you found it helpful. I tried to cover as much as I could, but if you think I missed something or are still confused about anything, please leave a comment on this video and I will try to answer it as best as I can. I worked on writing and revising the script for the video for like a million years, so I hope it turned out okay and was easy to understand. If you found my guide helpful or enjoyed the video, then a like or a subscription would be much appreciated. And if you have any comments or feedback that you would like me to see, then a comment is always appreciated as well. I have a ton of other videos on my channel, so feel free to check them out as well. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.